Hello and welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm Attorney John Redmann.
And I'm Shauna Sanford. Today's show focuses on an issue that is personal to so many people out there, domestic violence. It is a serious problem, not only in our nation, but right here in Louisiana parishes, cities, and communities. But there is help available, and for the next half hour, we're going to delve into the state's domestic abuse law.
How can the law help protect those who are victims of domestic abuse? Attorney John Krentel will be joining us to talk about this and other ways the courts handle domestic abuse cases, and we'll also be joined by Dale Standifer, the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children of New Orleans.
Well, I'm looking forward to talking to both of our guests, but before we get to that segment, let's just talk a little bit about the law. Would you say that this is a law that needs to be tweaked? Is it effective as is? Is there an enforcement problem? What would you say about it?
Well, I know that there are critics who say that the law needs to be, number one, enforced, that the law also needs to be tweaked where there appear to be loopholes. Certainly domestic abuse is very much a part of what happens every day, and we read about deaths from domestic altercations. But on the other hand, education is also lacking. Part of what we hope to do, empowering our viewers here on the show, is to let people know that they have options. You don't have to just sit there and be a victim and hide in the corner and hope that that bully spouse or boyfriend won't get too upset today. There's options and there's rights, and we're going to have a very important discussion and give you a lot of good information
That's
today.
right, and we have some great guests who are coming up. Attorney John Krentel and Dale Standifer from the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children of New Orleans will join us in just a moment to talk about the domestic abuse law and how you can protect yourself or help someone you love. So stay right there. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Well, if you're just joining us, we are focusing on domestic violence. There are far too many stories of women and men who die at the hands of their husbands, their wives, or other intimate partners. Attorney John Krentel has been on Power of Attorney before, and he's here again, as well as Dale Standifer. She is the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children of New Orleans. Both of them are here to talk about domestic abuse and how the law can help those in need. Thank you both so much for being here. It's an important topic, so we appreciate your time. And Dale, let's just start with you. When we hear the term domestic abuse, we all think we know what that means, but for the sake of clarity, explain, what are we talking about when we talk about domestic abuse?
It's a very broad term. Typically people think of physical abuse of a partner or a spouse, but it's also can be emotional abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse. There are lots of different ways in which people are abusive to each other, but it's a lot more than just physical abuse, and I think that's what usually people think of.
Covers a lot of ground.
And let's also make sure we're clear on who's affected. It's not just partners in a relationship. Children are covered in this definition, and
right. It's anybody in the family, actually. And the family is loosely defined as anybody you're in a relationship with. So it could be a boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend, a live-in, could be same-sex partners. So it's anyone that you consider to be as if they are your family.
And tell us about your center. Who do you help, and how does it work? How can anyone just come to your center?
Well, they would need to call us first. And what we would do is screen them and try to figure out an immediate safety plan for them. Are they in immediate danger? Do they have time to come in and meet with our attorney and explore legal issues? Do they need to actually go into hiding to get away from the person? Do we need to contact the police? There are a lot of factors, so they would call us first. But basically, if they come to us, we will take care of them, make sure that they are kept as safe as we possibly can keep them.
Very important. Aside from having a sort of a call for help to you, is there a charge for this?
Yeah, I mean, there are criminal charges involved.
No. What I mean, are there?
Oh no,
do they need
everything
to have
that we
a credit
do.
card when they call you?
No.
I didn't think so, but I want to be clear for our viewers.
No, everything that we do is completely free, and it's also as confidential as we possibly can keep it. There are a couple of instances where we might have to report something, but typically it's confidential and it's definitely free.
Well, Dale, you brought up charges. There are charges when it comes to this issue, and John, you know this very, very well. What are some of the big legal issues that come to the forefront when we talk about domestic abuse?
The major issue, Shauna, is the necessity for the abused person, whether it's a man or a woman, to seek the protection of the court through the appropriate provisions in Louisiana law pertaining to the prevention of domestic violence. And it's clear, and Dale can certainly comment on this, that restraining orders, specifically protective orders, are a very effective tool in preventing subsequent incidents of abuse for the victim. It doesn't eliminate the possibility. A protective order is a piece of paper, right, and it doesn't, it's not bulletproof, but it's certainly extremely helpful, because most individuals who commit these acts of abuse will cease and desist from doing so, will stop from doing it if the authority of the court imposes upon them very clear rules and regulation and penalties for violating the protective order.
Well, I think
Dale, would you agree with that?
I think that's very important. I really would like for both of you to comment on this, because I think the perception is that it is just that, a piece of paper. What good is that piece of paper going to do? And we certainly have heard of many stories where women have gotten these protective orders and something even worse happens to them. That is the perception out there. But when you say most times these actually do provide protection, explain that to us.
Well, one of our roles is to actually screen each case. If I am involved in a relationship with someone who's in and out of parish prison and who doesn't care, they're going to laugh at the protective order. They're going to say, all right, so what? It's a civil order. I don't care. But if I'm married to a prominent person in the community, they're going to be extremely embarrassed about the information that I have now shared publicly with the court system. And they may cease and desist just out of sheer embarrassment. Or they may fear the legal consequences. The issue, too, though, you have to really be careful, because if a woman is in a very rural area, very isolated area, when somebody is coming to come get you and all you have is that piece of paper, you have to call 911 and they have to respond. So can you get to a phone? And can they get there quickly enough to protect you? Also, once they get on the scene, the law enforcement, they're going to realize, wait a minute, this lady was already frightened. She has a piece of paper. It's giving her temporary, and John can cover some of the basics of that, but maybe temporary custody of the children, temporary use of the home, some other things that are actually in the protective order. The law enforcement officers typically will take that much more seriously.
Absolutely.
So we recommend that women do it. But we also recommend there are cases where all you're going to do is just really make him mad. And maybe that wouldn't be a good instance to do it.
Yeah.
The beauty of Dale's work in the community, and the unfortunate fact that it has been severely cut by the consequences of the financial circumstances in Louisiana. But back to the beauty of our program is that, and the work that they do, is they tailor individual plans for each person, woman primarily, who calls. And she assesses the degree of potential lethality, the dangerousness of the perpetrator or the abuser, as she just alluded to. People, just as a kind of a technical point, everybody has, according to Freud, 3 basic personality structures: the id, the ego, and the superego. And those words can sort of stand for the child, the parent, and the executor, basically in the middle, the adult, if you will. The people, as Dale just described, who are coming out of parish prison, with frequent arrests, et cetera, their superego, or their parent that tells them behave, is very weak.
Right.
That, as she just clearly presented, is a protective order is not going to stop them. They need external structure. Be it a jail or some kind of other very structured environment, so that they don't misbehave and hurt other people. But the majority of people will have problems dealing with their rages, and they might strike out at a family member, but they will be remorseful, truly remorseful, not just fake remorse. And that protective order imposed by the court, as she clearly stated, will not only will be embarrassing to them, but will get through to them, so that their superego, their parent infrastructure in their cells, in their deeper selves, is strengthened by the judge saying, don't hurt your wife, don't hurt your child, both from the bench, because the judge will say that, as well as that document, that they then, it provides them with a structure.
But you made a very good point, and you did definitely point this out, that protective order needs to be very specific and very detailed. Is that not always the case?
Yes, they are.
They are.
They really are. They're more detailed than you might think, and they're precise. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, and just to make sure that I'm keeping up with you.
Sure.
The fact of the matter is, just because occasionally, and it's a reality, some people they're scofflaws. They don't care that there's a piece of paper.
Right.
But you're in a much better position when you call 911 to say,
exactly,
my awful ex-boyfriend or boyfriend, I've got a restraining order against him. He's banging on the door, or he called me. He said he's coming over here. I'm feared for my life. The police will give much greater respect to that. If they show up at your door and you've never gotten a restraining order, then the cops are going to think, you know what, I'm going to arrest both of you, or I'm not going to. It's a he said, she said. That restraining order has real value.
It does. And Dale,
and that bad person who doesn't know how to behave, you get arrested a few times, you will land in jail,
which is not pleasant.
And that does have a taming effect, even if you don't deep inside of yourself say, okay, I'm learning to behave. That has a taming effect.
When the police come to the scene, usually it's chaos. People are crying, screaming, everybody's accusing everybody else of something else. But seeing that protective order, they know that a judge, who they have respect for, has actually reviewed facts and evidence and believes that she's in danger. And so it's sort of like a message to the law enforcement, this is legitimate.
That settles the argument.
It does. So, I mean, I think that's another reason why it's terribly, terribly important.
But how do you speak? Because, any number of people are watching this program, and we know that this is an issue that cuts across all racial lines, all socioeconomic lines. Everybody can be and is affected by this issue. What do you say to the woman out there or the person out there who right now might be in a situation where they need a protective order, but the fear is so great? And the follow-through, I understand, is very important on behalf of the victim in this case.
Right. Absolutely.
So
what they need to do is come to us, and we will support them. We will walk with them. We will have people go with them to court if they're afraid. We have an attorney who can actually help them fill out the paperwork. We will explain the system as best we can, and we will put them in support groups if they want to, or individual counseling. And so that's our part of it, is to take care of the fear. The lawyers take care of the legal process.
And John, while you're talking about that, we have the number to your center. We're going to go ahead and put that up on the screen so folks can, in fact, get that information. But John, continue.
Well, what Dale said makes perfect sense. And for a person out there, a woman out there who is fearful and hesitant, if she takes one little step to call Dale's center, the Center for Women and Children, and make that first call and speak with one of her counselors, that is the first step. And if that is successful, then she can take the second step to proceed as Dale would, counselors will direct. It's certainly better to light one candle than curse the darkness. That's so positive, but that one little step, just take a little step. Don't try to change everything, because it's not going to all change in an instant.
And let me make an added comment to that. A lot of battered women, and part of my background studies was in psychology. One of my degrees is in psychology. A lot of these women feel they don't deserve to be loved. They don't deserve, and so they will allow themselves to be battered. And what I try, in the occasions where I've counseled people in these situations before I recommend them to domestic abuse lawyers and counseling centers like yours, is do it for your children. Do it for yourself, because the example you set for your kids sets a pattern, because often victims of abuse grew up in households where abuse occurred.
Absolutely.
So
some of us become social workers.
And God bless you for that. So I want to get to the financial impacts that have occurred with cuts, but we're going to have to
and there are some big cuts coming
cuts.
that certainly could affect centers like yours and several around the state. We're going to tackle that when we get back. Coming up next, we will take on that issue, plus we will answer your questions. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Well, all week long we've been taking your questions about domestic violence on Facebook, on Twitter, and also by email. So we're going to begin with our very first question from Tammy. She sends this to us via Facebook, and she says, I've heard that I have to carry a copy of my restraining order with me. Is that true? John, you want to take that
I
one?
strongly recommend that she do that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Not only that, but she should also make sure that wherever her children are, they have a copy, like at their school, so that the abuser cannot go to the school and actually take the children out.
Oh, okay.
And provide a copy to the school personnel, to the principal and whoever
Right.
the staff is at the school.
Make multiple copies.
Absolutely.
You misplace your copy, you don't want to go, oops, trust me, I think it's at my house. Can you wait for me? You don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah.
Make multiple copies and have trusted friends keep copies for you. And so in the event that it gets lost, misplaced, you've got spare copies.
And copies can be obtained from the clerk of court's office.
Okay, all right. The other part of her question says also, how can I tell if I've run into my stalker in public versus him just happening to be in the same place that I am? I mean, is that...
I think that if somebody is stalking you, it's not going to be a coincidence. First of all, most people who are stalked change their routines. They don't go to the same hairdresser, grocery store, wherever. They're trying to keep from being observed. So I think if you would run into somebody, it would probably not be a coincidence.
Okay. Alrighty. How can we help the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children? Do you accept donations?
Good question.
We do. We accept, obviously, financial donations are very much appreciated. Donations of time. We really need volunteers to get involved, no matter what.
Maybe now's a good time to put the number on the screen, the website address.
People can actually bring by clothes and things like that, but we really want time from the community. We want more people to get involved, and we've had volunteer attorneys, we've had volunteer architects, we've had school groups that come and entertain the children.
Well, I think that's great, because what can these volunteers do? Is there some sort of training that's needed? People do want to get involved, but they need to know how. What exactly is it?
All they need to do is call us. Believe me, we will put them to work. There is some training involved if they want to actually be in our crisis line. Certainly there's a little bit of training involved if they want to work with the children. But there are a lot of things in terms of sorting donations and answering the phone and basic things that anybody can do. And I think it's good because the community wants to get involved, and we like to know that they're supporting us.
Yes.
One of the dilemmas that the center is facing is substantial cuts, and Dale can speak to this issue more specifically than I, but I saw on the news that you're going to lose $60,000 this year, I think. And,
We just did.
And that's major, because she doesn't have a huge staff to begin with. The benefit of the center, as she mentioned before, is that it's a secure place, a sanctuary, if you will, where women can go with their children to be safe. It's not known in the community even where the center is located, because it's not where the abusers can go and find the women, because they do try to do that, right, Dale?
Yes, they do.
And so it's a very closely guarded, appropriately guarded secret where the location is. But it's being assaulted not necessarily by the abuser, but by the loss of the money. And it's quite unfortunate that the money's being lost. And to suggest that women in many of the circumstances that they face can go to hotels is way off base.
I'm glad that you brought that up, and so just for the sake of clarity, let's just let everybody know that you're talking about the latest round of budget cuts that the
Yes,
governor
ma'am.
just announced, and this is because the state is not bringing in as much as it needs to cover the cost of to run the state government. We understand that, but it's directly affecting centers like yours and others around the state. Talk specifically about what these cuts are going to mean for your center.
Well, this one was kind of unexpected. We just found out about it actually right before Christmas. And what it immediately is going to mean is that we have to start looking at layoffs of staff and reducing the number of services. And they themselves have even suggested that this is not the end of it. We may have further cuts. And the state has even suggested that we consider closing emergency shelters, which I personally do not think is a good idea.
But can we even afford to do that, and just in terms of the volume of people who need help out there?
Well, they won't get the help. I mean, we house between 250 and 300 people a year. Do you have any idea what that would cost if you put them in hotels? And most hotels don't even have security. And how are they going to eat? And how are they going to get their kids to school? And all the things that we help them with.
And we want to be clear, too, about the whole issue of the hotel. The governor has said we're trying to move away from long-term residential care to short-term hotel stays, is what he's saying. He wants to
What can a woman realistically do in like 2 or 3 days? And I mean, even I'm not really sure what the going rate is, but I would think $50, $60, $70 minimum a night. That's a lot of money. And then there's no security. And so when she leaves to go take her children to McDonald's to get some food or something, she's vulnerable. And what if she's in a small town where there's only one hotel? And he knows, wait, my wife and kids are gone, let me go cruise by the hotel. So the whole thing is not very well thought out. We are going to try to make very careful cuts so there's a minimum impact to the safety of the women, but it's going to hurt.
Would it be fair to say that you see these cuts as another way of endangering the women who are already in danger and children?
I don't think it's intentional.
Right, not intentional, but is that in fact what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's exactly what's going to happen. And if we can't provide safety to these women, I would think eventually the crime rates are going to go up, and the instances of murder are going to go up. Interestingly enough, when battered women's shelters opened, you know who really benefited? The abusers. Because now I have an alternative. I'm not going to turn around and shoot him to keep him from hurting me. I'm going to go into a shelter. So statistically, when you look at over time, actually the abusers have come out pretty good on this deal because women go into shelters versus fighting back.
Wow.
So the other thing is sometimes when women fight back, they end up being arrested and they're in St. Gabriel.
Oh my gosh.
They're not even allowed to defend themselves.
We have more
Which
questions.
costs a lot of money too.
Yeah.
Yeah, one question comes from one of our viewers, and the question is, what does it mean to press charges?
Well, pressing charges is a phrase that's battered about, no pun intended, or bandied about. But what that refers to is a misnomer or a mistake, really, because the individual doesn't create the charge. The police officer creates a report that's submitted to the district attorney. If an individual is not arrested on the scene, it's the district attorney who presses the charge.
Okay.
But oftentimes individuals think they press the charge and that they can drop the charges. That's not really true.
Well, that's a very good question, because I'm certain there are situations where women may go for it or start the process and then want to step away from it or not carry through with it. Can they do that?
They can, but usually the district attorney, that's their decision to make. And they will say, because they're going to assume that the woman's being pressured or threatened.
Right.
And so usually, and this is something I'm very proud of, particularly in Jefferson Parish, they've come a long way.
They have.
They will say, this is not your decision to make. Now, the reality may be if you have a terrified victim who doesn't want to testify, that makes it harder. But you can actually have victimless prosecutions. You can move a murder case, you don't have the murder victim, testifying. So that would be the district attorney's call. And a lot of times they refuse to do it, and I think that's wonderful. And I have to applaud
the
them.
cases have to be that much more
District Attorney Connick
difficult.
has been very supportive
been-
to the center in Jefferson
And how much
for
more,
a long time.
How much more difficult are the cases when you do have a victim who does
They're
not?
not really. If the police have done their job appropriately, they're gathering evidence at the scene. There's 911 tapes. There are prior arrests sometimes, although sometimes they
Photographs
can't.
of bruises.
Photographs of bruises. They can talk to the children. They can talk to the neighbors. They can talk to coworkers. The physical scene itself, the fact that they have torn, bloody clothing, broken furniture, all those kinds of things. So if they do a good investigation, actually you don't need the victim there.
Okay. All right. Here's another question. I would like a restraining order against my ex-husband, but we share custody of our children. Will the restraining order supersede our custody agreement?
That's a question to direct to his or her lawyer, depending on the caller.
circumstance.
It's a little bit beyond the scope of this discussion here today.
Okay.
It depends on a lot of factors, really.
Exactly.
And the judge is ultimately going to have to make that call.
Custody is almost always open to negotiation until somebody is no longer a minor.
Okay. All right. Well, do I have any legal recourse for emotional abuse? We talked about this earlier. When we talk about domestic violence, it's not just physical, but emotional abuse is part of it.
You wouldn't have any recourse for emotional abuse unless there were severe threats. The point of a restraining order is to protect someone from physical harm. And it's assumed that if somebody is verbally abusing you, that you're not that afraid and you can probably do something like file for divorce or move or whatever. So no, it has to be something that is either physical harm or a credible threat.
Okay, well, we are quickly closing the show, coming to the end of the show. So before we let both of you go, though, what are some important points, maybe one or two important points that you'd like to leave our viewers with from the legal side, John?
Seek that protective order seek the authority and protection of the court. But first, contact Dale Center or the Catholic Charities Safe House Program, I believe is one of them.
Family Justice Center.
The Family Justice Center. Seek the professional assistance. Help work with them to develop that individual care plan for yourself, and then proceed accordingly.
Dale?
I think one thing too, just remember too, that I want everybody to know the laws in each state vary. So please don't grab your children and cross state lines, because sometimes there's some very severe unintended consequences. I think the thing to do is to think about your children and your safety and what the quality of your life has become, and seek help, and we will help you. We'll make sure you get the help you need.
All right, great information.
Excellent information.
Dale
Thank you for your
Standifer,
service.
thank you so
Thanks for
very
having
much,
me.
with the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children in New Orleans, and also Attorney John Krentel. Great to have you both on.
Thank you.
That's it for the show this week, but join us next week when we will take on another hot legal topic and discuss some of the things that you need to know to make sure your rights are protected.
Thanks to John Krentel and Dale Standifer, and thanks to all of you for watching and for sending in your questions and for continuing to support this show. Remember, you can go to jrpoa.com to watch every episode and to get information about all the subjects we cover on the show. We'll see you again next time.
Everyone, I'm Shauna Sanford along with attorney John Redmann, and welcome to this special web edition of Power of Attorney with John Redmann. We are talking with Dale Standifer. She's the executive director of the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children here in New Orleans. And Dale, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your time. We're talking about domestic abuse. It is a very real issue for a lot of people out there. And the one thing that we were talking about beforehand is this question of why doesn't she just leave? I'm sure you hear that all the time.
We do. We hear that a lot. There are a couple of reasons. One is she may not have any place to go. That's one issue. No safe place to go. She may be afraid that if she goes to a family member, that he will track her down there and harm other people. But I think that the primary reason is she just doesn't realize the danger she's in. And one of the ways I've explained this to grand juries and other people is that if you take a pot of water and you put it, lukewarm water, on the stove, and you take a frog, and you put the frog in the water, it's very happy. It likes the water. But then you turn the stove on, and it's warm, and it's relaxing, and the frog is very, very happy. And all of a sudden, the frog is beginning to realize, I'm getting lethargic, oh my God, it's boiling, and now I'm too weak to get out. So I think that happens a lot with women. It starts out usually, I mean, these guys don't start out abusive. They start out, I love you, I cherish you, I want to be with you the rest of my life. And then there starts with some verbal abuse, maybe some pushing, rough sex, slapping, whatever, and it usually escalates if there's no intervention, i.e. maybe going to jail or calling the police or something like that, and to the point where it just takes off on its own. And by that time, the woman may not be able to leave, just like the frog, until she's in a weakened condition. She's got no place to go. She's scared to death. And he has said, if you leave me, I will track you down and kill you. And by the way, your family and our kids. And it happens enough that even women who aren't really told that, if you read the papers, you know, go online and see the stories. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these guys, say guys, it could be the other way around. It could be, you know, men being abused. But
and there are cases of men.
There are. They're fairly rare, but there are.
But
I think a lot of times they just don't come forward. But he has everything invested in her. Everything invested in her. And so if she leaves, he's devastated. And I've even had instances, there was one case where the guy said, he left a note saying, I'm going to take her out and our child out so that we can be together in heaven.
Wow.
You talk about strange thinking. But he actually left a note saying that's what he was going to do, because the woman his wife was going to leave and take their child, and he wanted them to be together. So when people get to be that rageful that they're going to murder somebody, they're not thinking straight.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a very important point. And John, something that you were talking about a little bit earlier, for family members, for friends, for loved ones who are seeing, you know, their loved ones in situations that are not good for them. The thing is to be helpful and to understand that they really are not in their right mind, for lack of a better description.
And what do you do? I mean, you try to get through to them, but so often it seems like you have to get them to care about themselves first.
Right. When we have funds, we do caregiver support groups, so that if we do have family members, usually parents, who say, oh my God, my daughter's going through this and she can't see it. Sometimes the family members come in first, and we educate them, and we try to get them to understand that if their daughter or whoever doesn't leave a situation, the children learn what they live. And their daughters may grow up thinking, well, this is what happens. We actually have women in our shelter that don't think that there are nice men in the world. I'm so proud we have males on staff now, not many but a few, and they're going, oh my God, these guys are so nice. And they treat me so well. So one of our roles is to say, not all men are brutes, not all men are harmful. Don't settle for somebody who's going to treat you like a second-class citizen. So sometimes there's a lot of education and support that goes into that realization. And a lot of times we have to really sit down with women and say, okay, I hear you say, I'm not a battered woman. I'm not a battered woman. Do you admit that the relationship isn't all that healthy? Well, yeah, I can admit that. And then slowly you ask them all the different ways in which their life has been affected. Are you being pressured to have intimate relations when you don't want to? Are you being threatened that if you leave, your abuser's going to take away the children? Has he told you to quit your job so that now you're financially dependent? Has he isolated you? They're just so. Has he threatened you?
These are all warning signs. That
big warning signs.
Anybody out there who notices these warning signs with themselves or maybe with someone they know or care about, that should make them stop and think.
That, and then there's a couple of others. Extreme jealousy. I want to know where you are all the time, day in, day out. Oh, let me give you a phone, but let me not tell you there's a GPS in it. I want to know where you are. I'm going to text you. Particularly young girls, they find it flattering. He wants to be in constant contact.
At first, it seems very flattering.
It is, but then it escalates over time. And so pathological jealousy is one symptom. Any sort of cruelty to animals is huge. Jeffrey Dahmer did not start out with people. He started out with animals.
Big warning sign. Yeah,
so if somebody is able to be... The point of hurting another person is usually you have to objectify them. You can say, well, that's my baby mama. You know, that's not Mary, my beloved wife. And so just like if you had a bad day at the office and you came home and you saw your dog there, you might think, well, I'm just going to kick the dog. But if you say, oh my God, that's Fluffy, then Fluffy has value and you wouldn't hurt Fluffy.
Fluffy is it. Well, let me ask this, just for the sake of anybody out there, walk us through the process. Somebody finally gets the courage to say, you know what, this ain't right. This situation I'm in ain't right. And not only that, it's finally getting clear to me that the example that my kids see with me being disrespected so awfully, awful words even, I'm going to make that call. When someone makes the call and they tell you maybe that they feel they're in fear for their safety or their children's safety, walk us through that process.
They call us. The first thing we do is try to assess if they're safe at that moment. Are you at a safe place to even be making this call, or is he hiding out in the next room? So we assess that. And then we try to find out it's an empowerment model. What are you wanting to do? Now here's the issue. The lady who's calling might say, well, I think I only have 2 choices. And we might say, wait a minute, we think you have 5 choices. So broaden her options a little bit. Typically, we will try to make sure she's safe. We have multiple locations. We talked about shelters, but we have counseling offices in multiple places, at least for the moment. And so we'll try to get her to the nearest place that she can get to, transportation-wise, to sit down with a counselor. And then an individual safety plan will be developed. Okay, ma'am, we've reviewed your situation. We think you have enough evidence that a judge would probably sign a protective order. Therefore, let's make an appointment with our attorney or contact the DA's office, whoever we need to do that, to get you into the clerk of court. Can actually
this can happen within hours, within a day or two? Or?
Within a day, certainly.
Okay.
Our crisis line is 24/7, so we can talk to you instantly. If you were in severe...
And there's no charge for any of these services?
No charge, ever.
Including having a place to go stay? No charge?
No charge.
Okay.
The only time there might be a charge is if a woman is filing a protective order and the court does not consider her to be in a pauper status. Typically, they will.
All right. Well, my understanding is, and this is something we'll double check and put on the website, if you assert that there's domestic abuse involved, the Supreme Court has come out with laws, I think going back almost 10 years, that say they may not be charged a filing fee. But maybe that's changed.
They may not. It's not that they shall not.
Okay.
Which is a legal distinction. And we've actually had parishes where they said, I don't care.
Well, shame on them.
I know.
But we're running short on
Yeah,
time, so
sure.
let me let you finish walking us through the
Okay,
process.
so you've called, you've come in, you meet with a counselor who's trained. Many are licensed, some are not licensed, but they're trained. And he or she is going to make an individual plan for you. You need to go back and get your GED so that you can get a job so that you can be self-supporting. In the meantime, why don't you come to our support groups? Why don't you talk to other ladies who've gone through what you've gone through? Why don't we educate you on what is going on with your children, what it is they're seeing? And we have counseling for the children. They can bring their children to the center.
And that's provided for free.
Everything is free. Everything we do is free.
And it doesn't matter how many kids.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We just want to be very clear for our viewers out there.
And what'll happen is each woman is treated as an individual. So what a lady who has a PhD and in a very specialized field and could find work, will simply help her find a job. A lady who doesn't have the education will suggest ways in which she can get the education. If we're full, she still is our responsibility, and we will call a sister program and say, we will actually bring you to the bus station, get you a bus ticket. You can go to Baton Rouge or Shreveport or Lafayette. The shelter there, we've made arrangements. They're going to come get you from the bus station and put you in their shelter. So even if we're full, or if, for instance, we had a lady whose husband was a drug dealer, and he was over the top, and she was terrified. And I thought, not even one night at my shelter. So I called Shreveport. We made arrangements to get her completely to Shreveport.
So you can send them anywhere.
Well, anywhere we have the
Just
money to
about.
send them.
You
Yeah,
have the money to send them.
Typically, it's within the state, but certainly. Women that live close to my shelter, I wouldn't put them in my own shelter. I'd put them in another shelter if it's further away.
Well, Dale, we are out of time, but you all are doing wonderful work there at the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children, a great resource. And we just thank you so much for your time and all of the information. And for those of you who are interested in volunteering, because they do need volunteers, or if you need to utilize the services that they offer, the number to reach them is 504-837-5400.
Or donate money, which obviously can go to great use.
That's right.
Donating
Thank
money
you.
is obviously always a very helpful option in light of these drastic cuts that are coming your way.
Particularly in light of that.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you both for having me.
Thanks so much, Dale. For Attorney John Redmann, I'm Shauna Sanford. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you again.